now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and we're here talking to David Rountree. His website is spinvestigations.org, and his book is Paranormal Technology. David, before the break, I thought maybe you could tell like some really, really spooky stories or just interesting ones that you think really support the work that you're doing, because I don't know, I think it would be cool to hear about some of the weird stuff that's happened to you other than the phone line keep dropping part.
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind, amazingly. We were doing an investigation at an old four-square home, which was probably sold by Sears and Roebuck around 1900. It had been built on an original stone foundation from a little farmhouse, but the house was very active. But the activity seemed to be centered in the attic. So we had set up a great deal of instrumentation in the attic, and we had video cameras. We had several recorders set up, and we thought we had covered pretty much every part of the attic area with cameras and things like that. And we're reviewing the EV. Well, when we come up to tear down the equipment, we noticed that one of the mic cables on one of the microphones had been wrapped about 10 times around a chair leg and plugged back into the microphone. And I'm thinking the only way this could have happened was if someone would have come up here, unplugged the mic cable, manually wrapped it around the chair leg a bunch of times, and then plugged it back in. So I want to look at the video. So I look at the video, and the camera that I had set up could see if anyone was standing in front of the recording equipment, but it didn't show the recording equipment because there was a partial wall in the way. So we couldn't see the chair leg, and we couldn't see the equipment, but we could see if any human body was standing there doing it. And, of course, there was no one standing there. And then the second part of the evidence was when we went over the audio that was being recorded, it is obvious on the recording that someone unplugged the mic or something, unplugged the mic. It was unplugged for about 30 seconds, which is ample time to wrap it 10 times around the chair leg, and then it was plugged back in. And it was all audible. I mean, the click when it being unplugged, dead channel, click when it was plugged back in, sound there again. That was pretty creepy. And we had two new people that were working with us, and when they saw it, they totally freaked out. But what freaked them out worse was that John and I, who were the seasoned investigators working there, weren't freaked out about it at all. And it was because we have these things happen to us all the time, and they're interesting, but because we have no proof of it happening, it's just a good story. and that was one case that occurred, that there was some evidence that something weird happened. But we had another case that we were doing an old hotel in the center of the town I live in here, and we were on the third floor, which still had the old moldering hotel rooms up there and the paint peeling off the walls and, really in a bad state of disrepair. And I was getting a very weird waveform, EMF waveform, and suddenly the door came off the wall and kind of like bumped me in the face. Well, I just pushed the door back out of my way and kept reading, the instrument. And John looked at me and goes, "Dave, did that door just come off the wall and hit you in the face?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it did." And, of course, no camera, nothing caught it. It's an interesting story, but no proof that it ever happened other than two eyewitnesses that were standing there. And things like that happen all the time. Another creepy story, and this will be the last one. I was in Rose Hill Cemetery in Matawan, New Jersey, which is famous for the burial place of the shark attacks from the turn of the century that occurred in the Raritan River. We were at the back part of the cemetery, and every time that we would stop for more than a minute or two, stuff would come flying in at us from all directions, like little sticks, like the squirrels were angry at us or something. And then we were at the foot of a hill, and at the top of the hill was a brick wall and more people buried at the top. Well, I had on night vision glasses that I was scanning the area, and I noticed something come sailing up over the brick wall. And I'm watching it, and it's getting closer and closer. And I kind of like stepped back, and this 5-pound boulder like lands where I'd been standing. Now, that was pretty creepy because we went flying up that hill and scaled that wall, and there was no one around. And it was in October, so there were like dead leaves everywhere, and you could hear people for miles walking in the dead leaves. No one was up there. Now, that was pretty creepy because whatever threw that rock had to be pretty strong. I'm thinking like a Russian shot putter, that threw that rock. But that was pretty creepy. That was a little unnerving.
They got it out for you, Dave.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess I kind of angrify them. I don't know.
Okay, so I want to read this quote from your book, and for the people that are listening that know me pretty well, it's a tongue-tire. Okay. Okay. This is, well, it doesn't. I don't know what chapter it's in. Anyway, it's on page 53. Generally, the fourth spatial Kaluza-Klein dimension of hyperspace must be congruent with the third spatial Riemann dimension for the phenomena to manifest. This is essentially wormhole physics at its fundamentals, and what I term wormhole opening up and closing is the probable dimensional intersection of the Kaluza-Klein 5D with the Minkowski 4D. Okay, so the only word that I recognized out of that was wormholes.
That whole
see,
segment.
this kind of stuff makes my head just go. It's like, okay,
yes.
Physicist.
I know.
I'm not.
Yes. Well,
but I did not know the word wormhole. So what do wormholes possibly? I mean, right up there with gravity, have to do with ghosts?
Well, remember earlier in the show I alluded to it may be due to conduit activity, what we see as far as ghostly activity. And it's based on a series of experiments that we've been doing in which we think that we possibly have evidence that wormholes are not just theoretical, that they do exist, and that they exist all over the place on planet Earth. And sometimes things come through those wormholes, and sometimes manifestations occur at the throat of those wormholes. And based on the readings that we captured in the first experiment that we did, that was a very scientific egghead way of saying that, yes, it's very possible that we have measured and recorded a wormhole opening up, which would explain many, many things in the paranormal world. Like UFOs, how they can travel across the galaxy without breaking the law of relativity. Things of that nature. It's very possible they could be used as travel conduits. What I think is happening with ghosts is that, let's back up a little bit so that I can give you an idea of why I started looking at that as a potential answer in the first place. When I was young, remember when I was 8 years old and I was reading everything I could get my hands on, right? Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I read about near-death experiences where people had died for sometimes as long as 20 minutes and were brought back with no brain damage, and they were absolutely fine. And I'm thinking 20 minutes with no brain damage, that's pretty good. Oh, wait, I said that wrong. Anyway, consequently, I looked at what they said they experienced, and it's like they went down a dark tunnel that had a bright light at the other end of it, which is exactly what a wormhole would look like. So I'm thinking, what if when we die, our consciousness, radiates out of our body as propagated electromagnetic fields from all our brainwave activity now that has ceased to exist, is radiating out, and say we maintain the totality of ourself, and our consciousness as a whole, as pure energy, runs down this wormhole to a parallel universe that's existing in pure energy form and no matter whatsoever, we would go there and pretty much be able to experience the world of our dreams just by manipulating energy. And so, taking it a step further, what if from time to time that wormhole opens back up that we traveled down when we died, and where it opens up, we can go down to that wormhole and we can project ourselves onto that holographic boundary that covers a wormhole and create what looks like a ghost when it's really just a three-dimensional projection. Is that cool?
That is cool. So what you're saying is that they have like interdimensional access.
Well, the wormhole itself is actually an interdimension, and it connects two different places in space-time. So what could happen is literally this parallel universe could, on occasion, reconnect to our own and in a very localized area. When this wormhole opens up, guess what it's going to do? It's going to affect gravity. It's going to affect time.
But it seems like it would be a big difference in transporting something like a UFO or a thing.
Absolutely.
If we consider UFO things and a ghost.
Absolutely. Yes. And see, here's the thing. The wormholes that we are encountering are very small wormholes. But wormholes can be any size. If a wormhole existed in the upper atmosphere somewhere, it would be very possible for them to use these as gates, just like in science fiction, to travel from one side of the galaxy to another, or from one galaxy to another galaxy. It would be very possible to take a shortcut through time-space with a wormhole. And a lot of people mistake wormholes for black holes and say, oh, you'd be torn apart. No, you wouldn't, because gravity doesn't fluctuate the same way in a wormhole as it does in a black hole. A black hole is very dense and has extraordinary gravity, whereas a wormhole has different gravity. But what we've noticed, and what really turned me on to this was being a possibility, to stabilize a wormhole theoretically, you need something called exotic matter. And exotic matter is matter that has no mass. Now, that's kind of, you have to think about.
Is that like dark matter?
No, it's exotic matter. It's massless matter, which is kind of hard to grasp.
And not antimatter.
And not antimatter.
There's another one. Dang.
And there's dark matter, dark energy. There's antimatter. There's all sorts of stuff. There's dark flow in the universe. But what we're looking at is what happens at a subatomic level when a wormhole opens is that this exotic matter comes into contact with our matter, and immediately annihilations begin. And not nuclear annihilations, subatomic annihilations. If we had nuclear annihilations, people would have huge craters in their living room where a nuclear blast would have gone off. But instead, it's happening at such a small level, at like the subplank level, where you have subatomic particles canceling each other out, and they're emitting rather large bursts of gamma radiation. And that was our first clue. The gamma radiation was that something was amiss here, that something was going on. People don't generally have gamma radiation spikes occurring randomly in their living room. So something was going on. Then we noticed that in a very localized area, barometric pressure dropped, as if the atmosphere had changed in a very small area, indicative of a wormhole throat perhaps affecting the environment. Gravity fluctuations along three different axes started to occur. This started to make us think, my goodness, we're having a gravity fluctuation which could only be caused by, a slip in the dimensional interface between our universe and the multiverse. In other words, the soup that our universe floats in. So when you start looking at all these changes occurring in a very localized area, something had to explain that, and the only thing in science that comes remotely close to explaining it is a wormhole.
I think it's interesting that you're getting, issues with gamma radiation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but gamma radiation is the highest vibrating electromagnetic form of radiation, in our universe, or we've identified in our universe, correct?
Well, actually, there's cosmic radiation, which is even more powerful, and there's X-rays, which is more powerful. But the difference between X-rays, the difference between X-rays and gamma radiation is gamma radiation is a denser type of radiation. I mean, you can kill someone with X-rays. Don't kid yourself. And you can kill someone with X-rays a lot faster than you can kill somebody with gamma radiation. But the difference is gamma radiation, when we encounter it on Earth, tends to be very concentrated. It tends to be very high levels in a very concentrated area, where X-rays are very sporadic, and they hit, kind of like throwing BBs up in the air, and that's where they fall. And what we were encountering wasn't dense gamma radiation. It was a spike, like bip, 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 that sort of thing. And the spikes were like 350 millirads an hour, which was indicative of like Hiroshima after the blast. So if that radiation level was sustained, it was deadly. It was very harmful to anyone in the room. But because it was just bip, bip, it was just a spike. It isn't deadly. It's just it's just transitory. So, and then once the exotic matter has been annihilated to a certain point, then the wormhole becomes unstable and it collapses. And oftentimes people hear an audible pop at the end of a paranormal event. And we think that audible pop is caused by the collapse of the wormhole and the return of the atmospheric conditions back to normal. In other words, the barometric pressure immediately jumps back up to where it normally is, and there's a pressure change. And that pressure change causes an audible pop.
Was there ever any correlations between the gamma ray bursts and the wave patterns that you were measuring on other equipment?
Well, yes. In fact,
I have good questions.
Yes. Yeah, actually, all of the things that we have noticed changing in a paranormal event were occurring at this area where all this stuff is going on. And it's a very localized area of effect. I mean, you can be 5 feet away from it and everything is normal. But if you're within that area of effect, everything goes haywire. And the only way we found this was by constant data logging and magically being at the right place at the right time with the right stuff turned on. And we lucked out and caught something. So then when we knew what we were looking for, that's when I designed the EMF triangulation device. Because I thought, how can you detect, a conduit? I mean, we have no idea what it's made out of or how to detect it. But we do know that the EMF seems to be emerging from this wormhole. So if we are able to pinpoint the emergence point of the EMF, hey, we can find where the wormhole is and throw everything at it. And guess what? It works. So I designed essentially like a triangulation device where we have 3 coils that we set up around the perimeter of a room. We monitor the EMF that's in the room. If something begins to emerge that's abnormal, we start moving the detectors till we can kind of get close enough to map out exactly where it's coming from, and then we concentrate everything we have at it to try to determine what's going on. And it works. Is that cool?
That is really cool.
Now, we can't
really
come
cool.
out, yeah, it's cool, but we don't have enough data to come out and say that this is really what's going on. We have 4 experiments now that indicate that this is going on. But there needs to be thousands of experiments that indicates this going on, and they need to be done by many different people in order for it to be recognized as anything. But I think it's cool as, the devil that we found this. And it's definitely, it would explain many things if this were the case.
Have you ever had a psychic or medium at one of these experiments kind of reading the energy while one of these events were taking place?
No, we haven't done that yet. Bear in mind, we're at the very infancy of this research. So we are still refining the detection process. believe it or not. I am still modifying the equipment to make it more sensitive, to block out, unwanted noise, and that sort of stuff. We're still fine-tuning the detection equipment. Once I get satisfied with the functioning of the equipment, and this isn't the kind of stuff you can go back to the manufacturer and say, I want my money back, or can you fix this? This is stuff we're building, from other parts and things laying around in the lab. So it's kind of our own Frankenstein monster that we've put together here. So we're doing R&D on the equipment as well as finding all these tantalizing things out as we're running it. So we're in the very infancy of this research. So there are many things that I would like to introduce into the experimentation. I would like to energize the environment by, say, running a Tesla coil for 5 or 10 minutes and see what effect that may have on the wormhole formation. I would like to try to artificially open a wormhole using some type of energy injection means to see if that works. So, there's tons of things I want to do, but you have to take it a step at a time. You can't kind of like jump ahead and skip a whole bunch of stuff in between. You got to document your path. So, but it's cool, man. It definitely shows promise for a potential explanation for how paranormal activity occurs. We still don't know where it's coming from, but we may understand how it occurs a lot better.
Well, and one of the, this is a little bit off topic, but not, comments that I make about people who channel, that are like full body channels, that, that's what they do. They, channel Michael or whatever.
Right. I'm
not big on channeling. But anyway.
I'm talking to Michael Jackson, and I have his glove. So.
Yeah, that's it. One of the thoughts that I have is, okay, so these people are channeling this information, or they're receiving information from somebody else, but there's not anything to say that somebody else isn't somebody living in some other galaxy far, far away, or some other place who's having the same thought, and they're having this like little Vulcan long distance mind meld thing going on.
Yeah, like
and they're sharing information.
Biological transcommunication, yeah, definitely. And that's very possible.
That would be really cool.
Well, that's very possible because there's this thing in quantum mechanics called entanglement, right? That's like where they fire 2 electrons or 2 photons off in 2 different directions, and what affects the one 10,000 light years away affects the other one, because they're entangled. And I think that the human race is completely entangled. In other words, we share an entanglement across the whole spectrum of the human race. And it's very possible that we share that entanglement with ETs from another place. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If it's probable or possible, then it could be. So you have to kind of look at it that way. But entanglement would explain that, and it happens across vast distances instantaneously. In other words, the communication process between the 2 particles happens instantaneously, and it doesn't matter if it's 10,000 light years or 10 feet. It's instantaneous. And that's something quantum mechanics has had a hard time explaining. They can measure it, they can produce it, but they can't explain it. And maybe our research will help open the door for explaining that.
Mm-hmm. I think it might. It goes into that whole thing of non-locality and that whole thing, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
If you believe, we're coming up on a break here real quick.
I know.
If you believe that when people die, they go to heaven, period, end of story, that's it, then why, then they can't come back to Earth. That's an argument that I've gotten into with people. It's like, well, when people die, they go to heaven, and, they're locked up in heaven, and they can't leave, and the only people that are here are the demons, and those are the ghosts, and it's like, then why does it look like your Aunt Sally?
Well, you have to define heaven, and no one's done that yet. Heaven is defined upon folklore and belief, so...
But I mean, I think when you get into any of these fields, you have to really look at it for an open mind and a number of possibilities, and not say, well, this is how it is, and well, these people say this, so this is how it is. I mean, I think you really have to take a step back and take a much broader look at it and look at, well, what could be possible.
Absolutely. You have to be open-minded and objective, and you have to let the data lead you in spite of what you believe.
See, that's real science. That's not what you see a lot anymore, which is box science.
Yeah, you don't even see it in real science anymore, hardly. I mean, you've got to let the data lead you and not make your own conclusions, or fit it into your own mold. You've got to objectively let the data dictate your course. And that's what I try to do. I try to let the data take me down the road. And it works for me.
Well, okay. Well, the break is going to come up here in a second. When we come back, is there more to this piece? Let me ask that. Is there more to this piece, or can we talk about things like spirit boxes and weird stuff like that?
No, we can move on.
Okie dokie. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're here talking to David Rountree about his book, Paranormal Technology. Website, spinvestigations.org. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages. And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and we're here talking to Dave Rountree about paranormal technology and all things that go bump in the night. Dave, before the break, I suggested we talk about things, some of those oddities that come out of the paranormal world, like, I don't know, I've heard about like spirit boxes or Frank boxes or these things that talk to you, which I've never personally experienced, so I don't have any firsthand knowledge about them. What are they, and what do you think?
Well, I get asked this question all the time, so.
Well, we're going to get to some of those like regular little questions,
Yeah. No, that's good though. What I think is that someone's making a lot of money off a very gullible public, is what I think. Here's the problem with these devices. How they work is that they scan the commercial AM radio band, and they scan at a variable rate that can be varied by the operator, so that you can pick up a word or you can pick up phonetics of words. You can also manipulate these devices using handheld transmitters, such as a GPRS radio or CB radios, things of that nature. All of these things are very unshielded, and here's the problem with them. If you were talking to a dead person, so, let's assume that when you die, you grow a radio transmitter on your spirit that's capable of transmitting randomly across the AM broadcast band, and also you can modulate a voice by using a RF exciter and put your voice on that carrier wave and transmit it in a specific area randomly while you're, adjusting this thing to pick up these random frequencies. And if we assume all that, how can we tell that that's a ghost when there are literally on the AM band over 10,000 other potential sources for what you're hearing? How do we differentiate between that? Well, you can't. There's no knob that says ghost voices only on there. And if you run an RF spectrum analyzer adjacent to one of these boxes, you can literally see every carrier from a commercial radio station that creates every syllable that is picked up by that box. Now, there are diehard purists that believe desperately that these boxes work. And that's fine. But the reality is it's kind of like if you write a bunch of words on pieces of paper and you kind of throw them all into a hat, and then you reach in and you start randomly drawing them out. Eventually you're going to make sense. And that's kind of how they work. Yeah.
So not so spooky.
No. And the technology, the way it works, if that were the case, we'd be hearing ghosts every day on our car radios while we were tuning across the dial looking for our favorite radio station, and we don't.
But see, that's what I thought, is that ghosts come through on like a really low, well, maybe it's volume. I don't know. I try to stay away from that technology part, because I just go in and just do my little thing without any equipment.
I know you keep saying that. Your job's easy.
No.
But see, you have to live with it. I don't.
Yeah, but see, I just tell them, don't even think about coming around my house, and don't be too...
That's right.
Nope.
I'm
really good that way.
I have a spiritual shop vac, and I will suck you into the bag. So.
Well, actually, and I've said this at conferences, is that, I have little ghost glasses, and I put them on when I go into an environment, and when they're on, I can see the ghosts, and when I take them off, I don't see them anymore. And
cool.
Somebody raised their hand during the question and answer part and asked me where they could buy some.
Yeah, I want some of those. Where can I get those?
That's right.
Well, see, that's kind of the spirit box thing, and the
but
guy who invented
that. But I thought that the ghosts
that,
talk on. All right, hang on. But I thought that the ghosts talk on a different frequency or something, and that's why you have to take. And maybe I'm kind of thinking EVP, and that's why you have to put it in your computer and amplify it and do all this weird stuff to it, so that you can hear it. But we're not talking the same thing, are we?
No, because EVP is literally in the audio spectrum, period. There's no RF on it. It's just like your voice electronically. In other words, it's not audio, but it looks like audio. And how a recorder picks up EVP is that in a dynamic microphone, you have a voice coil. And the EMF excites the voice coil just like as if it were sound, because sound is exciting it by pushing a diaphragm. Well, you don't have to push the diaphragm because EMF will directly affect the coil and immediately be recorded as if it were sound, even though it isn't. And, of course, there's no way to tell the difference. What we're talking about is people scanning radio frequencies and the AM broadcast band and claiming that they're talking to ghosts, And the funny part about all this is that when people claim that someone like Thomas Edison told them how to build the box, I'm thinking, well, geez, if you're talking to the dead already, what do you need to build the box for? You know what I'm saying? The stuff doesn't make sense to me. Maybe I'm missing something here. But anyway, yeah, that's the whole thing. You look at this stuff and you say, hey, does this make sense? Is this logical? And no, it isn't. The problem is that the technology used is used every day, all around us, all the time, and nobody hears ghosts on it. So what makes it so different that in that specific instance you're hearing ghosts? And how do you differentiate between something that is normally being broadcast to something that is, paranormal? You can't. So whether it's real or not, or whether it's really talking to ghosts or not, you can't prove it. So what good is it as evidence? It's useless. So, yeah, it's fun, it's entertaining. But if you notice, the people that sell these things have this little disclaimer on there that say, for entertainment purposes only. And that should be a big clue for buyer beware, because it means they're making claims that they can't back up. So there you go.
Yeah. On different, Ghost Hunter, and actually the group that I belong to locally got one of these things. I don't even know what it was called, but it was like a little EMF meter with a bunch of little lights on it. And And Vicky, the one who founded the group, I mean, there were a bunch of times that she would be sitting in a room, like talking to nothing, in my opinion, and waiting for the little lights to flash on and off. And I mean, I've seen it on TV. What is that, and what are they hoping to achieve with that?
You're asking me.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I
Well,
do.
I mean, what is it? And I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me personally.
Yeah, well, it doesn't to me either, and I kind of know about that stuff. So, yeah, I've heard recordings of the supposed voices that they pick up, and to me, it's noise. I'm sorry. I mean,
No, but I'm talking about the little light thing. Where they would talk and the light would light up.
Yeah, that's the whole electronic Ouija board syndrome, where you use something like the stupid K2 meter, which, anything will set off. A car going by outside, the noise from the spark plugs will literally set it off, to communicate with the dead. And it's ridiculous. I mean, they use the flashlight, the whole unscrew the flashlight slightly. I guess they never took physics in school and learned about the arcing effect, which occurs due to relative humidity and connectivity and this sort of thing. So, I mean, all of these things have valid scientific explanations that do not include paranormal activity. So the onus is on them to prove that it is paranormal activity and to disprove the normal explanation for what they are encountering, and they don't do that. And they also don't like for people to run RF spectrum analyzers or other things around their stuff to try to determine what's really going on there. So it's bogus. It's drama, but it's not research.
It can be kind of spooky, though.
Sure, it's drama.
Kinda.
It's drama.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, it's drama. But as far as it being research, no, it's not research. It's a gadget. It's a gimmick. And it has no weight in the scientific community. So to me, it's interesting, but it's useless.
And that's really kind of sad when you think about it, because I would think the intention of the people going out as ghost hunters, on whatever level they are, there is a certain amount of intention of capturing something to use as evidence. And if you're using stuff that doesn't have any merit from a scientific point of view, I mean, there's, people's personal opinion, like the use of psychics in an investigation. But if it doesn't have any merit or is shown to be flawed, why would you use that? And especially, why would you put that out on TV where people think, oh, well, this is a valid tool? Because so many people look to shows that are on TV for, the latest in technology that's out there.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly the wrong place to look for it. What you want to be looking for it in is in, a laboratory supply house or something like that. Typically, anything that has ghost in the title that's an electronic device does not contain any kind of calibration whatsoever. In other words, you don't know what you're reading. You don't know what strength it really is. You know what the meter's telling you, but you don't know if that's accurate or not because it doesn't have what's called an NIST calibration certification. Everything that we use to set up everything that we do, we use NIST calibrated equipment, which is lab quality equipment. An EMF meter, for example, costs about $500 because it's NIST calibrated. People can't do that. People are on a very limited budget. They buy a $35 Mr. Paranormal EMF meter, or they buy a K2 meter, and that's what they use. And there's nothing wrong with using cheap equipment, but at least use scientific protocols when you use it, so that it means something when you gather something. And the problem is like you say, if it has no merit, why do people use it? Well, that's never stopped anyone in the paranormal community before. I don't look for it to happen anytime soon. As long as people are pushing this stuff and saying, hey, get this new ghost fragamarajits, it's infallible, people will buy it. and people will swear by its success rate. I mean, people buy ghost radar for their cell phones, and they have no idea how it works. And when you find out how it works, you will laugh your behind off. Because all they
tell us the secret.
All they do, they use the transmitter that's built into the telephone, and they zero in on the closest cell tower, and anytime the cell tower has activity, it triggers a random placement of an icon on the screen to show you that there's a ghost there. That's all it is. I mean, it's a gadget, you know? Come on. First of all, how do you detect a ghost if you can't define what a ghost is? You know what I'm saying? How do you measure a ghost? Well, how does a ghost manifest itself as energy? Does that energy have a unique signature? You know, we don't know. So how can you have a ghost detection box? You know, it's like crazy. We need to fill in the blank.
The part that made me laugh about that device is on what part of your cell phone is the detection part? Is it the earpiece?
No, it's called the antenna that's built in. All you're doing is getting the carrier. You're picking up the carrier from the local cell tower, and the activity of the tower is keying the different changes.
No, but what I'm saying from, the promotional point of view, because I saw it and I go, hey, I should download that. But then I thought, okay, an EMF meter has like something that actually measures EMF, and a thermometer actually has something that measures temperature. But what does your phone have to use as the measurement device? And I don't think the software, quote unquote, is that.
No, it's
anyway.
What they use for the EMF meter is they use the actual receiver. The receiver is receiving EMF, but guess what EMF it's receiving? The cell carrier. Because that's the frequency it's designed to operate at.
So if you go over to the microwave, that's like sending off all kinds of EMF, will it like actually detect a ghost in your microwave?
Oh, well, sure, if it falls within the frequency spectrum that the cell phone's working at, which it does. Many microwaves do, because if you've noticed, when you're talking on a microwave, oftentimes if you're near it, you're getting all kinds of noise and crap coming in on your phone because the microwave's interfering with it. So definitely your microwave could be a big fat ghost sitting in your kitchen.
I have a ghost in my machine.
Exactly. So, these things are like gadgets. Now, there are some applications that are good. They have applications that work off of the accelerometer that's built into the cell phone or into the iTouch or whatever that allows the screen to reorient itself no matter which way you turn it. That's called an accelerometer. And there are things like seismograph applications that are great. There are things like gravitational applications that will measure G-force along 3 axes. Those are great. There's a lot of applications that are actually useful and good, even though they are not so much, calibrated. They are close enough that where it can give you a loggable data feed to show changes. Now, it may not be the exact change, but you're at least documenting changes of the condition. So there are good applications that you can put on your cell phone or on your iTouch that are actually useful and do good things, wondrous and good. But ghost radar and EMF and those things aren't one of them.
But even if you're using not really expensive equipment, I think you could still create some kind of a baseline. As an example, in a parallel area, the blood pressure machines that are in the supermarkets, they're not that good. However, they do say that if you go do your blood pressure, try to use the same machine, or the little home ones. Use the same machine, and over time, if there is an abnormality, you will detect it because you have created a baseline with this piece of equipment. So I could see even not that great equipment being usable if it's used correctly.
Sure. Everything is useful if it's used correctly. And, that's part of the whole thing about my book. I tell you in there the best things, the worst things, but how to use them properly regardless of what quality they are. And if you use them properly, you can get good data. Now, is it accurate data? Maybe not, but it still may be good data because it may, as you say, demonstrate changes, documentable changes, and that's good data. So the quality of the data may not be what you would desire, but you can definitely demonstrate that something unusual is going on. And if you can demonstrate that, that's good data. So, it's all in degrees. But yes, even cheap K2 meters, when used properly, can be helpful. And when I mean with a K2 meter, what the proper use is like you wedge a dime in it so it's on all the time, and you stick it in the field of view of a camera, and when it lights up the room, it tells you to look at the real gear to see what the reading really is. So it's really good for getting your attention. That's what we use the K2 for. Seriously. But
I believe you.
that's when it lights up, it lights the whole room up, and everyone starts looking at the real stuff and saying, "Hey, something's going on," And then we find out that it really wasn't that. An airplane was flying overhead, and the pilot was calling the radio tower, and we picked it up. So, but that's the kind of thing you deal with.
So here's a topic that's kind of been beat to death, but I always get asked it, so I'm just going to have it flow downstream. What about orbs? What are your feelings?
I don't have to rely on feelings with orbs. I actually have done some experimentation and proved that there are real orbs. There are such a thing as real orbs. And what they are is cold plasma. They're not spirits. They're not little smiley faces. They're not Aunt Gladys. They're actually cold plasma that is being caused by dramatic annihilations and interference that may be the byproduct of a wormhole conduit opening. Now, having said that, they are very rare. Real ones are very rare. I'm going to say that again. Real orbs are very rare. I have so far photographed and measured 7 in the last 6 years. 7. The majority of orbs caught on photographs are dust or foreign particulate matter within 4 inches of the camera. Okay? Now, how can you find a real orb? You need to have several cameras covering the same area of a room from different angles, and you need to take pictures at the exact same time by using a photographer's trigger. And then you can take numerous pictures from 2 different angles. You will find that most of the time you will have orbs in one camera, not the other one, and vice versa. But every once in a great while, you'll catch an orb in the same place in the room, and the camera will show that in both pictures. And that ain't dust. So that's a good indicator that you may have an orb. Orbs tend to ground out very quickly. They tend to exist for a very short period of time, and they ground out, meaning that they come to ground and discharge. But they are made out of plasma, which is the 4th state of matter. And they are created by high-energy arcing, which ionizes the air molecules and turns it into glowing plasma. So there you go.
Wow. So you actually believe that orbs are possible as opposed to going pooey on the whole thing.
Well, see, I had heard both camps' arguments, and I always figured the truth's probably somewhere in the middle there. And I set out to find out for once and for all what the truth was. Instead of talking about it or, explaining the uninvestigated, I decided to investigate the unexplained and see if there was an answer. And it turned out that, surprisingly, there were instances where we had a type of cold plasma. It was kept stable by an encapsulating electromagnetic field, go figure. And we were able to capture one with an orb sucker, which was a little device that I built using a shop vac, a long piece of PVC pipe, and 2 aluminum screen door screen grids to capture it as it was sucked across the 2 grids, with a meter to measure the potential that was discharged from the orb. And we aren't able to accurately measure it because the current is such as that it blows the fuse in the meter. So we don't know how powerful it actually is. But some people have experienced what they consider to be a mild electrical shock during paranormal events, and we think that it may be that they get touched by one of these plasma orbs that are grounding out, using them as a path to ground. But they could cause your hair to stand up on the back of your neck, or cause, the feeling that your skin's crawling if it's near you. And you can't really see them with the naked eye because they are emitting photons in the ultraviolet spectrum. And the only way they become visible with a camera is because you are bombarding them with monochromatic photons, which they momentarily absorb and glow, and then they immediately shed them and return to their post-quantum state. So they are rare, but they do exist. So there you go.
Okay. David, we have like 1 minute before the music comes up. Any last words for the listeners?
All I can tell you is don't take anybody's word for anything. Prove it to yourself. And when you prove it, share it with everybody.
And your book, Paranormal Technology, where is it available?
Everywhere that Danishes are sold. Everywhere where books are sold online, it's available. It's available on all 6 continents. It was for a little while in Antarctica, but the guy came back home. But it is available at any online bookstore, regardless of the country that you live in.
Excellent. And I got 30 seconds. In your book, you keep referring to, I think, Gladys or Dorothy or somebody. I don't know who it was. I should have marked the page. I was like, who the heck is that? It's like, get out of here, Dorothy or Gladys. And
yeah, you just use names like, your Aunt Gladys, or, is it really your dead Aunt Matilda or whatever, It's just a figure of speech, It
made me laugh.
Well,
I just had to tell you, it made me laugh.
Well, the book could be very dry, and I tried to make it undry by adding some humor into it. So, but thank you for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
I think your book, just to put it out there, for anybody that does ghost hunting or thinks about doing ghost hunting, you really need to get this book because it really lays a very solid foundation for the whole genre. The best one that I've seen. It's not just about ghosty stories. It's about how to do a real, serious investigation. How's that?
Hey, that's hitting the nail on the head.
Okay. Thank you, David. I'm hoping that we get to see each other soon at some show.
I hope so, too.
Okay. All right. Be good. All right.
Yeah,
bye.
I'll be the best I can. Take care.
Okay. All right. Bye. That's David Rountree, his book, Paranormal Technology. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and next week, we're going to be speaking to Edmund Marriage about the Shining Ones. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for